Hello, in this video, I'm going to cover the Celestials and a few interesting little facts about them that can help people solo them down as long as you have at least a moderately geared tank set. For a Blood Death Knight, 3 of the 4 Celestials are easy to solo down with around a 550 item level, and 2 of them should be easy to solo down as long as you probably have over around a 515 item level. While I don't know other tanking sets quite as well as I know Blood Death Knights, I can make some reasonable assumptions into whether these bosses could be soloed down or not, as well as some tips in order to get some DPS in there to speed it up, so you're not in there fighting them for 2 hours. The first one I will cover is Niuzao, and he's rather simple to solo down, as he applies a buff to you that increases your total maximum HP. Now the interesting thing to note about this buff is that unlike other areas in WoW where buffs are given to the main tanks to increase their HP, your percentage of HP-based self-heals will actually use this level of HP instead of your original for self-heals. Obviously, this makes Blood Death Knights incredibly overpowered and are essentially invincible to him. Even rather low-geared Blood Death Knights, as current in 5.4, should easily be able to solo him down without the need of a healer to keep themselves alive. On this note, any class that uses percentage of HP-based self-heals should be rather strong in here. For example, Druids with Ysera's Gift talented. As all Druids have Leader of the Pack, this is also a very powerful self-heal once Niuzao stacks larger amounts of HP on you. Warriors with Second Wind will likewise be almost invincible to him once their HP reaches very high levels. They will simply need to watch out for his headbutt and use a defensive cooldown appropriately. Monks likewise will be fairly strong in this fight, though I'll admit my knowledge of monks is limited, so I don't have a lot of advice to offer for that. Paladins, unfortunately, will get no benefit from the increased stamina, as their heals are based off attack power instead of percentages of their total HP. And therefore, in order to solo Niuzao down as a prot paladin, you simply have to have the gear high enough to mitigate/heal through Niuzao's damage, which does ramp as he stacks buff on targets. One thing to worry about in fighting Niuzao is that when he does headbutt, he also clears aggro, and he is immune to taunt. This means that if you have any DPS helping you out, and they'll most likely be crushed by Niuzao right after the headbutt. Ways to combat this would be to use ranged DPS and simply tank Niuzao close to the side of the arena. That way they can stand outside of the arena and outside of his attack range. Grabbing a Celestial buff from the Celestial Shrines can greatly aid in soloing them down. The Yulon buff is especially useful. However, prot warriors, as they need to be able to survive the headbutts, and since Second Wind will not enable them to get their HP very far over 35% of their total HP, it might be better to use the Resolve of Niuzao buff. Chi is another one of the Celestials that's rather easy to solo down, simply because she doesn't hit very hard at all. While she deals a lot of fire damage, almost all of the fire damage is easily avoidable, either by just not standing in her tornadoes, or making sure to stand in the Beacon of Hope, and therefore most self-heals are usually good enough to simply heal through it. In this case, the Yulon buff from the Celestials will most likely be the most beneficial. And again, to prevent fellow DPS from dying, it's a good idea to tank it as close to the side as possible. That way DPS can stand outside of the arena where they are immune to her attacks. Xuen is slightly more difficult to solo down, but still possible. The stacking debuff Xuen applies does cap at 10, which essentially removes all of your armor. Therefore, classes that rely more heavily on armor, such as Druids, will have a more difficult time with Xuen. Xuen also has the ability Chi Burst, which will deal huge amounts of damage if you stand in it, so that must be avoided. With my own soloing down of Xuen, I found that periodically he did wear me down, and I had to use my Death Pact in order to get my HP back up. So rotating cooldowns might be essential to getting him down. With him, either the Yulon buff or the buff of Niuzao could be more beneficial. Being more difficult, while it was possible for me to solo down at a 551 item level on my Blood Death Knight, other tanks might have more difficulty. With enough people also in the arena with you, it might be possible to reset your stacks, as periodically he will leap at random targets and perform another one of his swipes. I was unable to reset my stacks during the fight, but I did come rather close on several occasions, and therefore it still might be possible. But the difficulty and iffiness of being able to do so might make it not worth attempting. Yulon is the only one of the Celestials that I found I was unable to solo down. While I did last around 50% of Yulon's HP, the fact that Yulon's buff, unlike Niuzao's buff and Xuen's buff, does not cap at 10, and instead just keeps stacking. And after around a 21 stack, I found out that I was taking too much damage and wound up going down. As punishing as Yulon also can be for your raid, it is very difficult to keep other DPS without healer support alive during the fight. And unfortunately, as much as you have to move, you often can't simply hold Yulon near the side where ranged can hit him from outside the arena. In conclusion, of the 4 Celestials, I find Niuzao is most likely the easiest one to solo. So whenever he's up, if you have a decently geared tank spec, go ahead and give it a shot. Paladins are the only ones who don't almost have a guaranteed way of being able to survive his abilities. Chi-Ji is also fairly easy to solo, with Xuen proving the first true challenge, and it may only be possible for very geared tanks or Blood Death Knights in order to solo Xuen down. Yulon currently remains unsoloable unless you have a lot of DPS helping you out in order to down it before the stacks reach too high, and you're simply one-shotted. But by bringing another tank, for example 2-manning it, the other tank can of course avoid the debuff, and when the first tank dies, he simply runs back into the arena, reses, and rinse repeat. Hopefully this will give some people some ideas, and maybe start up a few more groups for the Celestials without having to farm up 20 to 25 people to try to get them down. In these cases, it was only myself and maybe a couple DPS who decided to help me out. Also using this method, I was able to snag a pretty easy kill on my warrior. Basically, simply having WoW opened up twice on my computer, I swapped over to the second WoW, logged in, which of course disconnected my Death Knight, and then logged into my warrior, who I had already situated by the side of the arena. Due to the forced disconnect, my Death Knight was not immediately removed from the server, and still had aggro on the boss. My warrior simply ran in, tagged the boss, and collected his loot. For those of you with a fairly strong tank character, it's an easy way to grab a quick Celestial kill, depending on how many DPS you have helping you, on any of your alts, anytime you wish. Alright, thanks for watching.